to you in just a second here. Let me see. Oh, actually, we're just live now. We're not even going through the 30-second deal it's coming up. We just went live. So, yeah, instead of going through that other thing. So we'll get some listeners when they come on here one more time. So we'll just keep talking about that one thing. So when that happened, when you were looking at the draft, yeah, you made a choice too, probably just to go and and sign up. I remember I remember saying that too when I was in junior high. I said, I'm not going to get drafted, man. I want to pick what I want to do. I remember back then too, you can be in the Army and you can do a 2-year stint and have all the military benefits and I didn't do that either. I think we were so war worthy at the time and such a loss of Vietnam, our parents probably didn't want any part of us doing that.
Right.
Back in the day. So, all right. Well, we're live now. So I'll introduce you, Dave. So as people come on and you guys are going to re-look at this broadcast today. So I'm talking with a good friend of mine back from our early karate days at Tarzana Karate. And his name is David Storace. So he, as you guys know, if you do any kind of Tang Soo Do training with us or any of my Krav Maga training, that we have numbered black belts. And, Mr. Chikau is into the thousands. And I was his 100th black belt. And I believe, Dave, you were what number? 42, 43?
Number 42.
Number 42. Yeah. So I think that my brother was, he got his black belt a little bit before me. So, he's one of those little flyweights like yourself when he went through the system. He's the one that got me started. So you can see how far back that you started. So let's go back to where you started, Dave, as far as what made you decide to do martial arts. How did you choose Mr. Chikau's studio? How did you choose Tang Soo Do, or did it choose you? And let's go from there and see what you think. Let's start there.
All right, so what happened was I was, like you said, a flyweight. I think I was, probably $125 maybe. And all the sports that I was involved in, I was very athletic, loved playing football and basketball and all that stuff. But my stature wasn't really conducive to those types of activities. So I saw Enter the Dragon. And I watched Bruce Lee, and I said, he's not a real big guy, and I think I can do some of that stuff. I thought to myself. So I went to my mom and I asked her. I was like, I think 15 at the time. I said, you think I could start getting into karate? I want to really try this thing. And she said, sure, if you stick with it, because I've tried a few other things, instruments and things like that the kids do. And I said, So we got in the car and we started driving around to different karate studios, and one of them I remember was Bob Osman. Remember Bob Osman?
I remember Bob Osman. Yes.
And a few others we saw, and then we walked into Tarzana, and instantly I felt, at home. For some reason I just felt at home. So I ended up taking that week of lessons, the free week. I think it was late 75. December of 75, I believe it was. I took a week free of lessons. And then in January 76, I ended up, signing up for a program, and just never looked back. It was good stuff.
So it was, so I told you this little story the other day, and before we came live yesterday, and I spoke about, I called Mr. I. And right, so when you and I trained, I think that I was talking to Mr. Chikau about this the other day, that we've earned guys from back in the day. We've earned calling him Mr. I, because we've never called him anything else but Mr. I, right? Mr. Chikau, today is Grandmaster or Great Grandmaster. Even those titles to me, I can't. Those titles, I can't stand them. They drive me crazy. You know what I mean?
Right.
Especially when I'm still doing Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. You're calling me Grandmaster, yet I'm getting tapped out by people. I'm like, man, I've got so much more to learn that the title sometimes doesn't match what we're doing. And so we've got to earn that right to call him Mr. I, because students ask me all the time, why didn't you call him great grand? I said, we just never, that just wasn't part of what we did, man. It was never that. We've called him Mr. I since day one.
Right.
And so I talked to him about it. I said, Mr. Rich Cow, give me a story about David Storace. I'm going to have him on live tomorrow. And that's when he said that, I think it's the man and weight that you guys were. There was a group of you guys, and you were, and he related to you because Mr. I is a smaller dude. You know what I mean? And so these quick, fast fireflies, that's what I call them today. These quick, fast fireflies that do martial arts. You guys are built for it, right? You guys, I certainly wasn't the typical guy for Tang Soo Do. I really wanted to do judo, and my brother's the one that, Tang Soo Do found me. But you guys were so fun to watch, the jump turning heel kicks and all the stuff, how fast you guys could move and do what you guys do, right? And so there's a group of you that used to go out and fight. And you guys, what that's what you guys love to do. I think that's what people today, I mean, really didn't wear. People don't really realize we had maybe knuckle punches, if not some tape on our hands, and that's how we went out and fought, right? So let's talk about how and when, because you started in '76. We were just talking how you and I are the same age, so you're kind of in junior high. Did you start competing right then and there, and just continue on? And let's talk about your competition days.
Okay,
what that looked like.
I didn't compete right away. I didn't compete till blue belt. And I always just loved the fighting aspect of it. And so I just trained and learned. And then I started going to tournaments, and only to fight. And then after a while, Mr. Chikow, of course, he started, bagging on us about forms and making get your forms down because it's a total balance in the art and all that stuff. And I heard him, but I wasn't really listening at that point. So we just kept fighting. And we always were looking for a place to fight on weekends, all the time.
That's
so, right. Well, I don't know if
so we got quite a few people online. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, back in the day, I don't know if you remember when Mr. Chikow used to give a bunch of us keys to the studio. And so a bunch of us had it, and he called us welterweights back then, and a bunch of us used to get together and go to the karate studio at nighttime. A lot of guys would go to parties and all that stuff. We just wanted to fight, so we'd show up at whatever hour. It didn't matter what it was. We beat the hell out of each other, and it was great. And the only thing that we made sure of is that the sweat or any blood that dripped was wiped up off the mat before we left, because we didn't want him coming up and saying, "Give me the key back." So we had that respect, for Master.
It's so funny that what he does there. I remember having the key too, and I remember he would, Tom Block used to go in on odd hours too. And he would work out, and Mr. I would be so angry, like, this guy better clean the mirrors, man, when he's done. And because Tom, man, he was a workhorse, man. He's doing jump turning heel kicks and sweat's flying all over the place, and definitely not COVID friendly back then, but definitely I remember this vividly. That's probably why a bunch of people have keys to my studio, because I guess I've just kept that tradition. You know what I mean? You got guys that really work hard. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I've told everybody, I said, you have no idea. We'd burn the midnight oil at this place. Sure. People were out partying, and we're in there banging, and that's just what we did. So,
Mr. Scott, he said it the other day. I was talking to him last week, and he said, back in the day, he couldn't get rid of us. He said, you guys were always here.
Yeah.
Today there's a lot of distractions and a lot of other things they can do, but back when we were coming up, that was our life. We just lived martial arts, and that was it.
Mm. Yeah, it was good. And so I'll tell people about you here in a second. We've got some people that are hopped online saying hi to you. I don't know if you ever met Clay Pearson. He's one of my black belts out in Georgia. He's
Mm,
online. So we got somebody from Georgia. We have a Melissa out from Florida.
mm,
Ronnie's on. Patrick Prager. He's one of my black belts that has a school out in Santa Clarita. He's built just like you. He's one of those those little guys that jump up, fireflies as I call them. Keely's
mm.
on. Ashley Sage, she's another one of my black belts that runs my stuff here. So we've got quite a few people on here saying hi to you. Um, here's a big story about David Storace. If anybody doesn't know, the big boom at one
Yeah.
time was Tybo, right? Billy Blanks did Tybo. We had David Storace, so he did Tybo before anybody knew what Tybo was, and um, and so David Storace used to do a Wednesday night class, and he'd ask Mr. I, hey, you think I can do a little bit of music? And he would commence to doing cardio kickboxing. That's what actually is probably more cardio karate than even kickboxing, because
Mhm.
that's what we did when we did karate. It really wasn't kickboxing. I mean, back in the day when we trained back early, we weren't doing a bunch of mixed stuff. Like it just wasn't opened up for that kind of a thing. You got so much grief if you did anything outside of your norm. And so um, we went ahead and we all couldn't wait for David Storace because he was the little guy that was so fast. And then he would do this cardio. We just had fun, right? We throw music on. And of course, music was way better back then than it is today. And so we had much better music to do martial arts to back then. And that was David Storace's doing his. How did you come into that anyway? How did you decide that, hey, let's put some music and do this kind of stuff?
I don't know. I just, because of the craze, you watch the TV and all the people jumping around in leotards and all that crap, and it just looked like a tough workout. So it was about warm up. It was about a warm up, and I remember Mr. Chikawa telling me, he said, because we were so traditional back then, music in the karate studio was a no-no. So he did, because of how open-minded he was, he allowed it, but he said 10 minutes. I said, all right, we can do that. So I went and got my little boom box, and I walked in with my tape, and I started it out with "Eye of the Tiger." Number
That's right. That's
Eye of
right.
the
That's the best song for martial arts, man.
it was like a knee and then a leg lift and a couple of punch. I mean, I kept going and going and going, and it was weird because people really enjoyed it and it caught on, and my classes got really big. And I think it was just because of that, really.
What
They were
is,
in
well,
the
you had an energy though, Dave. So it wasn't just the music and new cardio. It was you had an energy about yourself that you know you were one of the one of the tougher guys in the school, one of the fighters out there doing tournaments and all that kind of stuff, and so you were known for that, but you had this energy about yourself and just a likable dude. You know what I mean? So it was fun to be around you, and there was never any kind of put downs or anything like that from in class. I mean, everybody's like, okay, you do what you can do and let's have some fun. And you were loving it just as much. And it just shows. It just goes to show what happens when, when passion meets talent. And that was what we had with you. You had some passion, and then you had the talent to show, to showcase, and not to mention you had like the Energizer Bunny, the endless energy that goes along with what we do. So it was awesome, man. It was probably one of my favorite memories out there. Mr. Ken Knight was my big mentor back then, and he loved you too. But he was the opposite of what you would do, right? He was the very, but he loved you he goes, this kid is awesome. You know what I mean?
I
So it
remember
was,
turn and
yeah,
strike.
yeah. It was great, man. It was an honor to be able to train with you back then those days. And I tell my students that they like to hear about these old days. A lot of my students like to hear about the old days, and I was telling them, I said, it's just not the same, bro.
Right.
And you
It
didn't
is.
have,
It was
yeah,
definitely.
you didn't have all the Oh, we had a lot of pride in our school, like you talked about. When we got done working out, I mean, we would make that place look spectacular. We wanted looking better than what we came. I've had even problems in my own school where um, I try and get the students to pitch in, and I've had parents actually say to me, uh, "Well, what we're not paying to clean the studio," and I'm like, "Wow, you just missed the whole lesson." I'm just like, "What?" I could never imagine my folks saying that. As a matter of fact, my
Right.
folks would be, you better get your ass in there and clean up after yourself is about what you better be doing. And it
Right.
just, I don't know, just a
I
different.
remember
So,
we
I think we,
the rags going. I mean, we always
yeah,
had something.
yeah, we always had something. So I think that's another thing that now you started martial arts a little bit before me. So you got your black belt, I think, in 1981. I got mine in 87. So there's a gap, but I think you and I came together just because of the fighting.
Right.
If I remember right,
Right.
right. I think that's where you and I, of course, I'd always come and take your class because it was just fun. And, but I think it's because we both had a fighting spirit is where we probably, you know,
Right. Right. Well, you were the killer. You were the killer.
yeah.
I remember a lesson that you taught me back then. We were fighting, and as we always were, and you're a big, strong guy, and like I told you before, I weighed about $125 back then, and we would fight, and I spar with other people, and then I got to you, and you and I started fighting. And I remember this. It was a lesson that I learned, and it's so vivid in my mind. We were fighting, and I would hit a lot harder when I fought you than I would hit other people. And not that I was hurting you or anything, but you noticed it. And you came to me after and said, David, just because I'm bigger than you, and the way you hit, it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. So you were trying to teach me a lesson about control. That in certain situations, you let it fly, and in other situations you don't have to. But I didn't really realize, because of my size, that it didn't hurt. But Mr. Ichikawa taught me to throw those things to where they hurt.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. You told me about that story, and it's like, yeah, I can see back then. I know that my reputation back then was a lot different than my brother. My brother was one of those real defensive fighters, very controlled and stuff like that. And you're right, I just had that. I don't know if you want to call it a chip on my shoulder or that just a warrior's mentality. And I think I've told everybody that before. I said there's a lot difference between having a warrior's mentality and being able to turn that switch. And I think, and you've been around me enough. You saw how much trouble I got into sometimes because of that. There was no joke that Mr. Ichikawa would be chewing my ass on a pretty continual basis. And I had a lot of lessons to learn back then. Even as big and tough as I was always just like, my attitude just needed adjustment, and that's what martial arts did. And I don't know, you were just a little bit, you were different than that, Dave. You were just just a good, everybody loved you, man. You were just a good guy. I'd like to get an old picture of you because you look like, just like Jason Flame did. You look like Johnny from, the Karate Kid back then. And, your blonde hair, how we had in the 70s, our hair was all nice, blown out. And, you probably had a nice leisure suit back then that you were doing flying sight kicks in and stuff like that, all that kind of stuff. So, it was awesome. I tell everybody too, but I said back in the day, there wasn't really, we almost had to learn control because we didn't really have equipment, at all, And Jason Flame said hi to you. He's online listening to us. I get you're going to be with him here pretty soon too.
Yes, sir.
He'll have different, it'll be fun listening to your guys' stories because he has a different perspective because, I live this stuff with you. So, you and I were chewing the same dirt for a while. It'll be exciting to see what Jay has to do when you guys get together. So You started now. Listen, you you started at the school before it was on the corner of Tarzana there, or where I was, right? And you were, I think, across the street. Is that where you started? And I think Rick
Yes.
Oakey was one of the instructors there at that time. Is that correct?
Right, right. It was the Capri Plaza across the street, down the street a little ways. And back in the day when I started, Mr. Chikawa and Mr. Gross were still partners. And they
Oh,
had Sherman Oaks Karate Studio and Tarzana Karate Studio. And I guess when they parted ways, they switched studios, and Mr. Gross took Sherman Oaks and Mr. Chikawa took Tarzana. So, and then a few years later, we moved down the street. But right, that was a great studio. I love the studio, man. It was cool, big mat, the big bathrooms and everything back there. It was really nice.
So the Capri studio was bigger than the Tarzana one. Is that correct?
Bigger.
The one in the corner.
Yes, yeah. The mat was big, wide, and square, where the Shirley studio was kind of narrow and long. Remember?
Yeah, but it had a great wall that you get to bounce people's head off, which I did on numerous times. It was fun.
Always, right. But the mirrors were all close too. Remember,
that's correct. Yeah, the mirrors were right. The mirrors were right there. I used to love that. I don't. Well, you remember back at the time. Sometimes when we were fighting, next door was, I think she had an antique shop. So there'd be times that we would, especially if I'm in class, I'll be throwing somebody up against a wall and knocking. She'd have to move all her stuff off that wall. The poor lady. I mean, I just, man, I remember that. I remember that vividly. And
so those were also, that was around the time where the karate craze it exploded in the valley because of Karate Kid. We lived through that whole thing. As a matter of fact, I went to a cattle call and I tried out for that part of Johnny, of the kid.
Did you really? I didn't know that.
I think, I don't know if it was Hollywood Boulevard or where it was, but there was like, I don't know, 1,000 guys, 1,500 guys standing there. And we didn't have phones, so we weren't all standing there doing that. But just waiting, and I had a backpack over my shoulder and a little book I'm reading. And all of a sudden, here comes Mr. Pat Johnson. And I guess the director and a producer or something, they're walking down the line and they're just looking for a look. They're just looking for somebody. And I couldn't believe it, but this was like my one claim to fame, my 15 minutes of fame or whatever you call it. But they're walking down, and Mr. Johnson actually recognized me. And he looked and he says, "Hey, David, how you doing?" I said, "Mr. Johnson, great, thank you." And they kept walking. So I went back to my book, and all of a sudden, all these guys come around. "Oh, my God, you know Mr. Johnson. How do you know Mr. Johnson?" Blah, 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 blah. So that was my claim to fame. I didn't get the part anymore.
Well, talking about that now, did you take any class from Pat Johnson? Was he around?
No, he wasn't around. He was around. I mean, I saw him at tournaments. He used to hang around a lot at Roger Lacomb's school. And I remember we'd go out there and we'd fight at Lacomb's, and Mr. Johnson would be there a lot. And but the stories that Mr. Chikawa told, you just know the man, basically. So, but I never got.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. Yeah, I tell everybody about what our history is. What people don't know, and we'll get into your tournament days after this, is that we come from a huge lineage of fighters. Chuck Norris and Pat Johnson, their fighting team was unstoppable back in the day, and and Pat Johnson, he did a few classes for Mr. I when I was there, and I got to take and he fought all of us. So I fought him about. I don't know if you want to call it fighting him or getting our ass kicked by him. I don't really know which one it was back in the day, but I remember one time I was sparring with Pat Johnson, and he's like, "You gonna hit me, or we gonna bounce around?" And I'm like, you're like, "Man, if I hit him, what?" And so you start going harder, and then I've eaten some of Pat Johnson's body punches and these what we call flipped back knuckles. I mean, his back knuckles was just as powerful as a jab. You know what I mean? And people just don't. The old school karate. I mean, you just don't really. And so I got to have him a few times. So We are real lucky about that. So I tell everybody, our lineage is the Karate Kid, just so you know. Pat Johnson's the one that taught them all. Mostly Tang Soo Do is what's on set. And you'll even see Nyachi forms on some of the other ones. I said, this is our lineage. We are the Cobra Kai, even though we have Mr. Ichikawa, who's Miyagi. You know what I mean?
Right.
And Mr. Ichikawa is definitely the Miyagi, but he's got a little Cobra Kai in him. He likes us being a little more on the edge. He loves it. I know he does. He eats it up like candy.
Sure.
So,
he was telling me about Mr. Johnson, how he probably got the move from one of our katas. He probably came from one of our intermediate forms. But that was pretty cool.
Yeah, isn't that funny? Isn't that funny? People have, we have a very rich tradition in fighting. So that brings me to what you did, and how you got into the tournament circuit in the old school days, and maybe some of the lessons you did. And I know that everybody kind of measures themselves by the Long Beach Internationals, what that looks like. Everybody fighting in the long day. You had the patch every time you got to compete. You'd have a patch, and everybody would put them on their pants. The patch with the flame on it, and it was known that Bruce Lee was at that tournament, and that's one, where he showcased. And so it was a big, huge thing. Matter of fact, you were probably there. Remember the big fight that broke out at the Long Beach Internationals, where we were throwing chairs at everybody, and police had to be called in. What an embarrassment for martial artists. But you fought in those. I think you told me you fought for 16 years in there. So let's talk about your tournament days and what that looked like for you.
Well, yeah, that was the Internationals was fun. It was always the first weekend in August, and it was like I think it was August, first weekend in August, and it was like an event. I mean, people would go there with their RVs and get hotel rooms, and everybody would lay around, and it was a whole weekend. I mean, you'd be at the convention center at 2-3 in the morning because you're finishing finals, and it was just a crazy time back then. But when I started tournament fighting, there was no safety equipment. It was totally bare knuckle, and that happened for about a year until Jun Rhee came up with safety kick and safety punch. And I remember a lot of guys getting hurt more once we wore gloves than when we didn't, because I guess they thought that those 1 ounce gloves would protect you. But
Yep.
you just let your shoulders fly and you knock the shit out of somebody. So. But
yeah,
the Internationals was fun. It was. But I went. It wasn't only the Internationals. The Internationals was the biggie. That was the event. And 16 years of that, and I got to fight. Great guys from people would come from all over the world. You get guys from Germany and Japan and Mexico, and you learn so much from all these guys, just like they learn from you. And the camaraderie?
Yeah.
Back then it wasn't such an attitude where we'd get together and beat the hell out of each other in a tournament and then go out and party. It wasn't like you were all pissed off at somebody, and it was like, you got me this time, but I'll get you next time. Back and forth either way. So it was fun stuff. It was a lot of fun.
Now, Dave, known as a fighter, which most of us were, but you had some pretty solid basics back in the day anyway. Your forms were always pretty solid. Did you do forms in competition too, or are you just a fight?
Well, it started out with just fighting because I didn't really I liked forms, and I always performed them as though it was a simulated fight. So like Mr. Ichikawa always taught us about that the forms were a simulated fight, basically. So I've always performed my forms with a lot of intensity. But I kind of put them on the back burner because, I like to fight. But Mr. Ichikawa, what he did and how he got me into it was, he probably doesn't even know this, but he would pull like really cool stuff from like forms like Rohai or these other forms that we weren't at that level yet. And he'd pull little pieces of it and he'd put together these design forms. And those I thought were cool. So, then I started getting interested in forms, and I would perform. I figured, if I'm going to be there all day in a tournament, you show up in the morning and you don't leave till late at night, I might as well have more to do than just fight. So I started competing in forms as well.
Yeah, Mr. Chikawa, he had a way of doing that. You know what I mean? He, yeah, and you know what? And he's a stickler. I called him the other day about you, right? I said, and he answered the phone. I said, hey, "What are you doing, Mr. I?" And he goes, "Oh, I just got done doing all my forms." I'm like,
Thursday.
he is, he is so. He's 75 now, and he's still doing all his forms. So I hear you go down there with him sometimes and do those with him now, right? He told me you used to go to the bar and grab a beer. Now you go and do your forms.
Right. Well, the bar, my fiance Keely, she get her. I call it Keely maintenance. She gets her hair done, her eyelids, eyelashes, or whatever it is. And what I would do is I'd go there with her and I drop her off, and then whatever bar was near, I just grab a beer and wait. I look at it as working, because I'm always talking about real estate with anybody I can find. So I was kind of working also. But then I got to the point where I'm thinking, the one bar was right down the street, right there by the studio. So I said, I'm going to start going and working out if I can. So that's what I did. And now I don't go to the bar anymore. I just go strap on my belt and I hang out with Mr. Chikawa. And he's helping me. I want to get that next rank. So he's helping me along with that. It's really neat.
Well, if there's anybody that I know that we talked about your master's test for yourself, and I look forward to training with you on that, and we'll show them what the new 60 looks like, with these young kids. But I couldn't wait to see you do that. I've told everybody, I said, there's a gamut of people way before me. Just because I'm one of Mr. I's highest rank, it's because I owned a school and I had perseverance. I just didn't quit. Eventually at some point, you're going to be right next to him at some point as far as rank goes. And, but seeing somebody like my mentors that are coming up, I told everybody, just because you have a rank doesn't mean you don't have a mentor. Mr. Knight never tested. I would never,
right.
I would never take a seat before him on a panel. You know what I mean? It just, he was just such an awesome dude. And here's a couple, I'm sure you remember Gary Wachowski. He wanted to say hi to you. You remember Gary?
Yes, I love Gary.
Does that name sound familiar? He's a banger. Yeah, he's a banger. He used to like to freaking fight, that's Prager. Yeah. My black belt says, I wanted to fight. I can see why you trained with Mr. Storace, GMC. Yeah. Well, I tell everybody, there was a certain amount of us here that just like to fight. I mean, it's just like what we like to do. And it, I think those lessons back in those days too, Dave, is, if you couldn't handle the fighting, man, you just kind of got, we probably lost a lot of good people just because we didn't really teach fighting. We experienced fighting. You know what I'm saying? You weren't taught how to fight. You either survived and got your ass kicked and learned from your mistakes. That's how you learn how to fight. Now we have a little bit, have to worry about a lot of stuff. Even my own kids that, watching my son even do some cage fighting and stuff like that, seeing concussions. I don't know how we survived. I mean, I got rocked back in the day, so I don't know what, I did some rocking and I got rocking, so I don't know. Maybe that's what's wrong with us. Maybe my short-term memory isn't what it used to be because of that. You know what I mean? So, but it certainly was fun. I wanted to give a quick respect to you on what it was for me, so you can see it from my perspective of how we perceive each other. I knew my reputation in the studio, and I just wanted to make sure that you knew, just how much loved you were at that, back in the day, and what you started. I don't know if you know this. I went and we did cardio. Was it cardio karate? John Graydon, I think, was doing these big things out in Florida where cardio karate was really big in classes. And so you're doing all this, all this movement and all this. And I went and took those classes, and you were just ahead of your time. And I think we all do kind of what you do today. Every time we do it, if we do any kind of cardio stuff in class, we always say, I know me, I'm sure Jason Flame says the same thing. Hey guys, we're gonna do a little warm up. This is old school. This is what David Storace used to do when we took class. And so I'm sure Jay says the same thing. Mr. I says the same thing today. And it was just something that you did. And I'm glad that I was able to live part of that with you. And, I know that you and I banged around. I know we did with the Block Brothers and all that kind of stuff. So
we did. There was something going on. But with the cardio stuff, I think what Mr. Chikawa, he swears that I invented it, because he knows that I went to college in Texas, and I fought all over that state in tournaments. And then I went to college my second 2 years in Michigan, and I fought all over Michigan. And Billy was from Michigan. So I fought along the way. When I was in college, I'd get these jobs, and I'd teach karate in health clubs and stuff. Or they called them health clubs, and now they're gyms. But it was pretty cool. And he swears that I probably taught one of Billy's students, and then he heard about it. This is what Mr. Chikawa's here. But I tell you, Billy was a lot smarter than me, because he marketed it.
That's right. Wait, we may have ideas, but if we don't capitalize on them, somebody else will, right? And I say that all the time. You'd be surprised, and we look back on our life and go, "What, man? I was doing that before." And then the part that I probably for you, right? What our kids don't understand is you'd have to mix a tape for class, right? We'd have to have a cassette and record this song, wait till the next song, record this. So we'd have a mix thing. We didn't have iPods and all that. We had to physically make cassette tapes so that we could have the songs that we wanted for our, we'd have to buy a whole album for one song. We didn't have a 99-cent deal where we can get that. So it just wasn't, like that.
Remember the tape recorder with play and record, and then you'd have the pause button waiting on the radio for the song to come on.
That's right. And then when you hear it, you have to run, push the button, and say, "Okay, I got it. We'd missed 10 seconds of the first part of it, but we didn't care. And that's just how we did it, man. It was good. Jason Flame said the same thing. He goes, short-term memory is gone. I know that. Poor Jay, I've rocked his head a few times. And he says that, he remembers you too. Mr. Rachi is one of my favorite instructors, loved his energy. Oh. And so, you had a good reputation back then, Mr. Storace. It always has. It always, we talk, when your name comes up, it's always just about just how tough you were for a small guy, and just how much energy and that you had, and everybody loved to be around you, so it's probably why, you went from that to be, success in your business now. So, before I go in there, on a personal note, how many children do you have now? And I hear that you're a new grandpa, right?
Yes. 2 kids, 2 children. Michael is 28 and Brianna is 26. And Brianna just had Talia, baby girl. And she's my little granddaughter.
Well, I haven't quite experienced the grandpa part yet. We'll see what Michael brings down the road, but I envision myself with a granddaughter or a grandson, and I'm just like, life, you blink your eye and it's gone. And I think you'll agree that we lived at a time. I tell my children, I said, really enjoyed. We didn't have these iPods or phones that encrypted our life. I was out playing pickup basketball games, and we were playing mud ball at CSUN when it was the rainy season. We'd be playing, tackle football in the mud, and we would just be completely muddy, and we'd be playing basketball. And I was an avid racquetball player back in the 80s. I played forever. And, so I just think that we got to have some just grew up in some really, not that it wasn't rough, because like I said, we were probably thinking about war and what that's going to look like for us, but Still just those days where the studio, I guess, was our iPod, was our video game. We lived the video games. We didn't play them, man. We didn't do this and have, finish him. We were finishing them, on pretty much. That's what we did. So Dickie, I guess Dickie got to work out with you. He's told me this a few times. Dickie Billings, he yes. goes, we were talking about you last night. He came, over to my house last night and we were talking and he goes, he's still fast, Mr. Cox. And I said, what? Well, why wouldn't he be, Dickie? Why wouldn't he be still fast? What are you trying to say? He's old? And I said, you should glove up with him, bro. You know what I mean? And so, but I guess he's got to see some workout with you. So seeing you back from, now you have the new generation that's kind of looking at you and going and working out with Mr. I, it's just an awesome thing, Yeah,
it was neat coming back after so long away from the martial arts. Even though I didn't train formally, my whole life I kicked and punched, hit a bag. I always stayed in shape. So coming back was just, I don't know what happened. I think when COVID hit, I was looking for something that I could do. My fiance, Keely, she's a fanatic about health and workout. And so she inspired me to start doing stuff. And the natural for me was to get back into martial arts. So what happened is it sparked something. Once I started doing it, it sparked something in me and I became like a born again martial artist. I can't get enough. I'm out in the backyard doing forms every night now, and she's on her treadmill thing or whatever it is. And she's sweating in here, I'm sweating out there, and we're just doing our thing. And it's just a whole new love for me, and it's just,
that's, well, and once again, a testament to what you are. So I see this all the time. In COVID, you either learn from COVID, you either controlled COVID or COVID controlled you. You either going to barricade yourself and not do anything else or improve yourself through it, or you're going to let it do, you're going to let it encompass you, or you're going to kick its ass. It just is what it is. You know what I mean? And, you have that same thing. And once you catch the bug, you catch the bug, you know what I mean? We got a couple other comments before we hit David Miller. I don't know if you know Dave or not. You may or may not. He was the pastor when I first started at Rocky Peak Church. It was called Faith Mountain at the time. Pastor Miller was one of he was our lead pastor there. And, he was an avid racquetball player too. I remember a quick story about racquetball when Dave Miller was, they were taking questions when they first were looking at him for our head pastor. And they said, I understand that you play racquetball. And he goes, I do. And they asked him, well, are you any good? And he goes, well, I don't want to brag or anything, but I practice hitting low shots on the curb outside my house. I'm like, that was I'll never forget that. It was good. Right. Jay, I got a couple other stuff for you. Jason said it's true. It's right. Being in school is always our home away from home. Now, here's a name from the past. You remember Glenn? This is Glenn Sebulak. You remember Glenn?
Oh, Glenn.
He's a forever green belt. He's the oldest green belt in Texas. He never got his black belt. And I hear he's an old cop now. And him and I got to do a lot of fighting back in the day too. So Glenn was just a really cool cat. If you think about it, you think about his name after we get down here, you might remember Glenn Sebulak. But I know that he moved to Texas and out of the communist state of California. So
I'll probably know see him.
So I thought what would be good now that we've got some of your backstory, and so I think what you did, Dave, is you sent me something in the mail the other day, and this is nice letter about thanking me for having you on and stuff like that. And then you have this brochure, right? This brochure that you sent me. And so now you're a real estate agent now, right? With Berkshire Hathaway, I think is what it's called, correct? In California here.
Right.
And your brochure, it caught my eye that you have this picture of yourself after 40 plus years, I still get a kick out of real estate. You know what I mean? So martial arts, obviously, anything we take inside the studio goes to the outside studio as we move forward in life, right?
Right.
And so you had these 8 important lessons in your brochure. What martial arts training taught me that made me a better person and a better real estate agent? And I just thought that I would take the back half of what we do before we end and talk about this. You have eight points, and I thought we would just take a minute on each one a little bit and see how you've taken what you've learned in the martial arts into your real estate business, right? So number one, you have focus and concentration. And so what you put in here, it says, in these complex times, distraction is constant. Proper representation in the real estate business does not allow for distractions. You will have my full attention at all times. And then it's pretty much like what a fighter does, correct? So why don't you take 30 seconds or so and let's talk about that focus and concentration part.
Well, when I was younger and getting these lessons from Mr. Chikawa, I mean, I know after all these years, he understands how important he is to all of us. I mean, he's Mr. I. So focus to me, I mean, I know we learned a lot of these lessons, and again, I'll say, we listened, we heard it and all that, but for me, none of this stuff really clicked and came together as a unit and meant as much as until I got a little bit more mature. But focus, concentration, clarity. There's so many distractions in today's world, so when you're doing something like selling a house, for example, you're going to have a stack of paperwork and hundreds of signatures, and there's a lot of real precise things that have to happen in a contract. So it's just like, it's just like fighting, or breaking boards. You have to focus on your target and hit it. And the only way you're going to hit it is to focus and to make sure that you're accurate. So the focus and concentration is a big thing in anything, and these points that I go over, these I've paralleled with every part of my life, no matter what I was doing, work, relationships, any problems you have with people. Mr. Chikawa always taught us to go back to the basics,
Mm-hmm.
And for me, this is the basics of my life anyway. I just take these points and I stay basic with it. As long as you go back to the basics, I think you can keep balance. So that's basically focus.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Number 2, you have here for respect. And I agree with you 100% on that. Respect is unfortunately underrated in today's world. Treating everyone involved with respect creates a favorable atmosphere of cooperation, which results in higher quality transactions. I don't think there's anything bigger than respect in martial arts, right? You want to take a minute what you thought is on that.
Well, respect is another basic. I mean, a lot of times you hear people, in any situation, and they'll say something that really doesn't need to be said. That guy's a stroke or this or that. I think you need to figure out where people are coming from, what's happening in their life or whatever, and just respect where they're coming from, because in a contractual situation or a negotiation situation, I always looked at negotiation as combat. It's mental combat, but it's combat. A guy hits me with some negotiating point, and it's like you block it and you punch overhand right, left hook. You go in with your negotiation. So to me, that's how I looked at negotiations and business in general. It's just you have to have respect for that person, know where they're coming from.
Awesome. 3, you have teamwork, Dave. You said my clients benefit from the sum total efforts of all the Berkshire Hathaway team members working together as a cohesive unit to make your transactions a success and provide you with unequal service. So teamwork is your number 3 important lesson.
Right. Teamwork to me, I mean, the reason why I'm with Berkshire Hathaway, the people at this office, we have 250 agents. We have 4 offices now, and it's such a great team of people to work with in a highly competitive industry. People are truly happy for you when you have success, and little successes, they congratulate you, but it's not just congratulating you to say congratulations. They truly mean it. And willing, and we're all willing to help each other along that path. Anytime you need help or whatever, you just get it. You don't have to even ask for it. People just dive in and help you along the way. So it's a really neat thing to have in this type of a industry. You don't
And I
see it.
think, yeah, I think that that's something else learned back in the day when we used to all work together, like you said, in the midnight hours. The teamwork that we had around each other for us to push each other to a next level, or to push through problems or whatever. I think this is a great lesson in your brochure here. This is number 4. I think is really really good, and something that took me a long time to learn in the martial arts, right? Even imbalanced temperament, lack of control prevents transactions from coming to fruition. A real estate transaction can be a very emotional experience. Preventing harmful outbursts is paramount to stress-free experience. An even balanced temperament produces a collaborative atmosphere resulting in optimal results. This is really powerful, I think, your even and balanced temperament, what you have here in your brochure.
Right. I mean, I know when I was younger, I was a hothead sometimes, and anytime that anything ever happened in my life and I became a hothead, it always threw whatever I was trying to accomplish out of balance. And it's almost like people will say something to you in a transaction, and you feel like it's a personal affront, so you might react a certain way that you probably shouldn't. Where if you just calm yourself, think about it for a second, and then you can respond intelligently and keep the balance. So I just learned, through martial arts that, that concept, I mean, I always remember people saying, if you fight a guy that's real angry and mad and he's out of his mind, this guy's off his nut, you're going to really pick him apart because he's not focused on really what he's trying to achieve. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in the military and police terms, that's a OODA loop, right? Messing somebody's OODA loop up is what gives you an advantage. And sometimes having an even balanced temperament messes somebody's OODA loop up because it disarms them. And it's just such an important lesson here. You know what I mean?
sure.
And I really, this one stuck out to me more than any of them, believe it or not, because I guess, in life, we always kind of look at things. What we struggle with in our own life is what we are attracted to. Like even like grading on a test, right? We usually hammer somebody on something that we don't do well. You know what I mean? It's just a human nature. And so this was a powerful for me anyway. Number 5, you have self-discipline. With my 40 plus years of training and competition, I have learned the power of self-discipline that provides my clients with constant and reliable results. Let's talk about your self-discipline part.
That in the martial arts, I learned you have to do the work. And coming up through the ranks, I think the lesson I learned was both positive and negative. I mean, on the positive side, people said I had some natural ability. So what happened was I was able to skip a few ranks on the way up. And, sometimes you do that and you get a little bit of ego going and you think you're all that. But then when I got up to, I think it was my black belt test, and I failed it. And that was the biggest lesson of my whole life was when I failed that test. And the reason why I failed that test, not that I didn't have the ability, because Mr. I even told me afterwards, and you're fine, you're good. You just didn't do the work. So self-discipline. Well, you remember
I remember, dude.
It wasn't retest; it was fail. And being told that I failed the test with big FAIL, that really, really drove me to be the person I am today. Because if I would have passed that test, it would have been what would it have meant? It wouldn't have meant anything to me. that was the biggest thing that I learned in the martial arts, in the self-defense, their self-discipline, do the work.
I did not know you did not pass your first black belt test. I did
Right.
not know that. This is news to me, and to hear it, because I remember back in the day putting hours and hours in, and then, Mr. I'll tell you today, you didn't even key eye in your form. You failed that test. Okay. And you have to continue doing that test, and you failed. Right.
Right.
In your head, you're like, well, yeah, that one's over. And how many people would quit today because of a failure? Listening to you tell that story and say what that is such a that's powerful today. That's something I didn't know about you. I can't even believe that David Storace didn't pass the test. That's probably one of those things, Dave. You're such a natural at it. When I gave John Wooden a black belt one time, an honorary black belt, I asked him that question. John, how do you deal with people that have supernatural abilities, and not that makes everything goes easy for them? How do you deal with that professional athletes? And I've never said he put his arm around me, pat me on the back, and he goes, sometimes people need a pat on the back, and sometimes they need a swat on their behind. That's how. And I was like, I'll never forget him telling him that, that with, Kenny Broderick and I doing that. So that was awesome. That was really good. That was an awesome thing there. Number 5, self-discipline. Number 6, man, we got a couple more here. You have responsibility on number 6. It says, I embrace my level of responsibility in what may be one of the most important transactions of your life. I consider your trust a privilege. So you're taking on this responsibility. Let's talk about that. Your thought process on that, on what that looks like.
Okay. Well, most people, a real estate transaction is usually, in most cases, the biggest thing financially they'll ever do in their life. So I've got a very, very overprotective nature, and I really overprotect my clients, my friends, my family, and I do the same thing here in real estate. So these contracts are long, and there's a lot of verbiage, and it's really confusing for people. So I really try to take the time and explain exactly what's going on for these people. It's my responsibility. I mean, if a mistake is made, it could be big. In these transactions, real estate transactions in California are big. There's a lot of money involved, and it doesn't take much to screw one up. So I've always looked at it and taken responsibility for that and everything that I've done. I mean, if I parallel this with martial arts, it's the same thing. The reason why I failed, I took responsibility. Yeah, I was upset, but I didn't get pissed off. I knew I didn't do the work. I knew I thought, I'm kind of natural at this stuff. I'll get it. Well, I blanked out. I blanked out on a form, but I'll tell you what, I did work. And the next time I tested, it looked pretty.
Right. That's another thing, and I guess that correlates with responsibility, is just having this extreme ownership. I think that's my favorite book I've ever read, is just taking extreme ownership. Because here's the thing. Yeah, of course we're going to be pissed off, because that's what we do. And we want to, and usually we're going to force that anger out this way. That's why, as a school owner, I can't tell you how many times people are so angry at me, for parents or whatever, for something their kid, they got their kids. Instead of just taking responsibility, when you start taking responsibility, it lowers stress level. You know what I mean? And having extreme ownership has been the most freeing thing that I think I've done for myself for a long time. And that so correlates with responsibility. Because when you take responsibility for your actions, that's where you grow. When you get pissed off at somebody else because something you did, right. And I was notorious for this as a young man. You know what I mean? It was always somebody else's fault. It's so-and-so's fault, and da-da-da. And I realize now, when people come back on me, they're going to have to learn that same lesson. At some point, they're going to say, hey, I've had it happen many times where you come in and go, Mr. Cox, back in that time when you did that, that was on me. I should have, I shouldn't have done that. So your girl's on here saying no pain, no gain. She probably kicks your ass, bro.
That's her motto.
Yeah, she probably freaking working. She probably put you to task, I'm imagining. So 7, we got 2 more to go. We got patience. So, I like, this is something that this takes a long time to have, but today's real estate transaction is a complex, sophisticated series of legally binding agreements, all of which interact with each other. It takes tremendous patience and focus to work through a myriad of variables to achieve the desired results. So, yeah, I think patience and fighting go hand in hand. Yeah.
Without question. And, again, in a real estate transaction, there's so much. And a lot of people will look at all those contracts and just blast through them without really being patient and reading them and understanding what they're actually seeing. And in martial arts, I'm experiencing that now because there's a lot of new katas that have been added since the last time I tested, 1995. So
I know, man.
I've been learning a whole bunch of new stuff. And in the old days, I'd want to go real fast, hurry up and go fast and learn this stuff. Today, it's different. I've got that patience. I know about it. I know how to apply it. So I'll take a kata and I'll break it down into pieces and just master that piece. And then I'll go on to the next piece and master that piece and then put it all together. Back in the day, I wouldn't have had any idea how to do that. And because of patience, I'm able to do that now.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's one thing that, studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu with Sergio now is if there's anything I've learned, you better be patient in that game or you're going to get your neck snatched up. You know what I mean? You better be able to weather a storm and have patience and wait for the opening for sure. Absolutely. So your last one, which is a good one to end on, is confidence, right? Successful negotiation in today's high dollar real estate transactions require a high level of skill and a higher level of confidence. Let's talk about that.
Right.
Your confidence level.
I think that in the martial arts anyway, that came along with actually doing the work, achieving certain ranks along the way. And, Mr. Chikawa, loyalty is big to me. And I'm so loyal to Mr. Chikawa. I mean, he's actually I think I posted it last week. He's one of my heroes. I've learned to be confident through the years and years of his teaching. He probably doesn't realize what he means to a lot of people. But the confidence that you get through the different levels and through the different years is just incredible. And in business, it's the same thing. I look at things and I learn certain things the same way I learned from him. I try to really take the steps. And I keep saying, do the work. It's such a basic concept, but he always taught us, black belt's a master of the basics. So anytime I ever had a problem, I would go back to the basics, no matter what it was, because ultimately that's where you're going to find your answer, in the basics.
Yep, in the foundations. I think that's it. It's awesome, Dave. I was very, just how you sent me the letter and everything else, I could see how even in your business, you've taken what you've learned in the dojo and you've taken it out to the street. You've probably changed many people's lives with their most important investments that you have. I'm sure, people may not know you ran a restaurant for a while. I'm sure you took these same principles that you did running a restaurant. And, we've experienced heartache, both of us in life also. And without our martial arts training, with some of these principles in here, we would have, that would have even been harder to do. I think your quote says it all in your brochure. It says, "A man who has attained mastery of an art reveals it in his every action." Samurai Maximum. That was, I think that was a great quote in here. I really got a lot out of this, just so you know. Just to see a brochure and you hold one, that's just not something that you see any day. Everybody takes their phone, they scans their hey, dude, what's your FB? What's your IG? I'm like, what? And I'm just to hold a brochure. I used to have these when I used to hand these stuff out too, where people can physically see this, and I got a lot out of what this is, Dave, as far as what you have here. And so I hope everybody kind of gets I'm looking forward to what Jason Flame and you guys will talk about next. I knew that you and I had chewed the same dirt. I'm sure, I heard some stuff that about you and I's days, and it's always fun, the when you're the old junkyard dog, when you were the young pit bull at one time. I tell Mr. I that all the time. I said such a young pit bull at one time. And now I'm just kind of the junkyard dog, but the junkyard dog is the one you got to be careful you don't mess with. And, because it's got wisdom experience behind him now. And, I couldn't have done it without Mr. I too. So, with that, Dave, I wanted to make sure that, I want to tell you this, how important you were, in my young time coming up in martial arts. I wasn't a bantamweight like you guys were, but I certainly enjoyed your energy, and it was fun to be around you at the time. I know how competitive you are. I'm a super competitive dude, and so that's probably why we kind of attracted to each other anyway. And we have, we are men of faith at this point. I know that church is important to you, just like it is to me, and leading by example now that we're a little bit older and we can appreciate the Lord even more. If we didn't have him through our heartaches, I know that you lost your wife, to cancer, just like I lost my nephew in a very similar time frame. When 2017, a couple years later, you saw what we had to go through. If it wasn't for the Lord in our life and having Jesus, we would have had even a much harder time. So with his promise, we get to see these people again, and so being a man of faith is just probably tops everything that all these lessons we have, is to be followers in strong men today of faith can move mountains for sure. And you're definitely one of those. So I really wanted to thank you for coming on here. I look forward to hearing what your next one is with Jace, because I get to hear it now and see what you guys will talk about and what wisdom you'll give everybody that day. So with that, I'm going to let you close out with your final thoughts on of your martial arts days and what this is, and then we'll end it. So
all right,
I'll let you have the last word.
It was just martial arts was life for me and a lot of us back then. I mean, that's just what we did. There weren't a lot of distractions. And I think the thing I'd say is my friend Greg Smith, I think he might be even listening. His mom said something that I just quote all the time now. And in taking control of your life, her point is she says, it's your little red wagon, pull it. So I'm going to leave it right there.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, I want to say thank you once again. And if you guys are looking for, I guess now you know a man that if you're looking for somebody that you could trust in real estate, or you got friends that want to do it, I will have his information here after this. He'll be on my website at markcox.com. And there'll be a blurb about him. There'll be a phone number. There'll be an email, a way you can go look him up at davidstorace.com. You have your a website of your own here, it looks like. So you can find him. Any of our old guys from back in the day, if you want to reconnect with him, this will be a way for you guys to do it. He's on Facebook also. And, that's for old people, according to what my kids say. So you can find him there. And I'll just with that being said, we got a couple other guests that are coming up this week. The next one I do, I think I'm going to be in Georgia, and I'm actually doing one of my black belts named Justin Reese, and he's actually in Uganda in the jungle. He's been there as a missionary for 10 years with his family. We are going to be doing a podcast with him from the jungle. So, and what it looks like, his black belt training, what it's done. I mean, we have a Starbucks life compared to what he's got. And, he's coming up. I got Blake Foster. I don't know if you ever met Blake or not. He was one of the Blue Power Rangers, but he was a big tournament guy himself. He just got his 4th degree black belt with us. He's coming up, and my Hapkido instructor Farbors is coming up in the next four series, and he's going to have we got some really good stories together too, and when we get to meet. So we're looking forward to those. Dave, have an awesome day. Thank you so much for spending time this hour with us. I'll get all your information out there. Share this with your friends, guys. It'll be on my this is our video podcast, so it'll be on our YouTube channels. It's live on Facebook right now, both on my at Real Talk and at Mark Cox and my YouTube channel, but it will be on a talking podcast also, so you can just put it on in your car. I'll be downloading that later today. I'll give you all the stuff so you can share it out with your people. Okay, Dave?
Thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you. It was fun.
I love you, Dave, man. It was a lot of fun, and you brought back a lot of good memories, and it was just a feel good time, man. God bless you. Have the Lord bless you too, man. I'll see you. Bye-bye.
Take care.